And, you could do a study on that and really get a fascinating read on how that moment influenced that generation of players. A lot of those games, those Japanese role-playing games, I gain a lot of my leftist perspective from Japanese role playing games because they're all, and I guess maybe it's not super fair to credit specifically them for that sort of thing. Like there's always going to be rebels rising up against the evil empire, right? That's Star Wars. That's the hero's journey to a degree. But I mean, that's not Call of Duty. Call of Duty, you're the military industrial complex led evil empire in those games. You're in your fucking fatigue, going to some Middle Eastern country, blowing away brown people or whatever. And so there is a different vibe there. There is a different zeitgeist. And a lot of those games that I grew up playing, those role playing games, they instilled in me the concept of the scrappy band of rebels for one reason or another. They were always more political than Star Wars was, because Star Wars was it's like a 2-hour movie, and it was fun and cool, and I liked it. But I played Suikoden for like fucking 60 hours. I watched the rise and fall of the Scarlet Moon Empire in the first one, and then I went back to the Scarlet Moon Empire, which they called the Toran Republic. The Toran Republic in Suikoden 2, so they weren't an empire anymore. It was just a republic. And you saw the president, who was a dude who was in your party in the first game. He's now the president of the republic in the second. It's like, oh, the politics have changed. How did the politics of the Toran Republic relate to the politics of the Dunnan Republic? Like, Dunnan was different. In the first Suikoden game, those two sides, the Scarlet Moon Empire and the Dunnan, I guess it was called the Joustin Alliance, actually. The Dunnan Republic formed after the war in Suikoden 2. But in Suikoden 1, there was the Joustin Alliance, which were an alliance of city-states that basically, had trade agreements with one another and kind of operated as independent city-states, right? Like, the city itself was its own state government. And on their border was the Scarlet Moon Empire. They had a history of warring with one another, border scrimmages. They just did not like each other at all. And eventually, after the fall of the Scarlet Moon Empire, it brought rise to the Toran Republic, and they had their own internal conflicts to deal with after the fall of the Empire. But they did allow themselves to tacitly ally with the Joustin Alliance as the alliance was forming a more unified army against the Highland Kingdom. So Suikoden 2 is a war between the Highland Kingdom and the Joustin city-states. But the Joustin city-states were so disjointed and disorganized that they could not form a unified front against the Highland Kingdom. So the Highland Kingdom just barnstormed through the Joustin states and was conquered Muse, conquered North Window, conquered South Window. They were just moving all the way through, almost conquered Two River, and they did, I think, get Green Hill. But they were just moving all the way through, and they just had no resistance because the city-state, they couldn't agree to anything. And some parts of the city-state, like Rockland, were bought off by the kingdom and ended up betraying the other city-states, and it was a mess. And the only unification that happened was from the main character, of Suikoden 2, building his own little party, his own little alliances here and there, and then going and liberating these towns that the kingdom took over. And as the liberation grows and rolls from town to town, the army more formalizes, and eventually what happens is, at the end of that game, that rebellion army, that rebellious uprising that was built to liberate those cities from the Highland Kingdom, end up becoming the nucleus that transforms the loose alliance of the Joustin city-states into what is then called the Dunnan Republic. So they become a more formalized country with their own standing army. And it encapsulates the Highland Kingdom too, because eventually, once they liberate all their towns, they move into Highland territory and basically just take over Highland as well. So Highland's gone by the end of Suikoden 2, and it's all Dunnan Republic. It's a fascinating political story. And a lot of that informed, mixing that into the Final Fantasy VII, basically you're in that game, you're playing the role of an eco-terrorist, and it instilled in me, okay, major corporations that suck resources from the planet to the detriment of the planet and the well-being of people that rely on those resources, for their own personal profit. These guys are the bad guys. Full stop. They're the bad guys. They must be stopped. Like all of these things kind of bled into my dumb brain at that time. I'd just been watching Dragon Ball Z and reading X-Men comics, although X-Men comics also played their role too. Helped form all of these different thoughts and ideas and whatnot. And I think that speaks a lot to a lot of people in this who are in my age cohort as well. And it sucks that, there are also similar things happening to, kids in their teens and whatnot. If they're 14 years old, circa 2002, games that speak to them about, the world that they live in. Kids who are 14, 15 right now, games that they play that speak to the world they live in. It really sucks that it's not going to be preserved for people to go back and look at and talk about and experience for themselves. It's hard to do, but you can still find copies of Suikoden and Final Fantasy VII and play them. I know now that it's mostly digitally available, but again, how long is that going to last? How long is the digital preservation of those games going to last? So it always sucks. And I had Final Fantasy VII digitally on my PlayStation 3. But my PlayStation 3 broke, and then shortly after that, Sony was like, all right, we're killing the PlayStation Store on the PlayStation 3. And I was like, wait, I have a lot of games on the PlayStation Store on PlayStation 3. What happens to those games? Like, do I just not have them anymore? The answer to that question is yes. So it's like, this is bullshit. Like, this is bullshit. I had so many games that I purchased digitally on the PlayStation Store for my PlayStation 3. That's why I haven't really done it on the PlayStation 4. Most of my PlayStation 4 games are physical games. And when Microsoft first announced their plan to make the Xbox, I guess, series, I can't remember which one it was, the Series 1S or X or whatever, they wanted to make it digital only, and there was a lot of backlash over it. I remember the game studio I was working on at the time, the general thought was, people need to get over it because this is just going to be the future, blah, 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 blah. And I get that too, but again, I fully side with the people that were in uproar over it for these very reasons. So, yeah, this sucks. And I don't foresee it getting any better in the future. I wish there were better ways to preserve physical copies of these games. Hopefully, something happens in the near future that makes it more possible, but I just don't see that happening.